Old Hollywood dazzled the world with its glamour and perfection, but behind the flawless close-ups and silver screen smiles were secrets few ever imagined. Beneath wigs, behind gleaming smiles, or even hidden behind a glass eye, some of cinema's greatest icons defied physical limitations to become legends. These are the 18 stars whose carefully hidden prosthetics never dimmed their spotlight. Chirdu. Peter Falk. To millions, Peter Falk will forever be the rumpled, cunning Lieutenant Columbo, never quite polished, but always one step ahead. Yet few fans realize that Falk had only one real eye. At just 3 years old, he lost his right eye to retinoblastoma, a rare cancer, and wore a glass eye for the rest of his life. The prosthetic never dimmed his charisma. In fact, Falk leaned into his unconventional appearance, using it to his advantage. Producers worried at first. Was Hollywood ready for a leading man with such an imperfection? Falk proved them wrong, starring not just in Columbo, but in dozens of films alongside stars like Alan Arkin and Bette Davis. His glass eye became part of his unique persona. Sometimes it would shift slightly during scenes, adding an eerie charm to Columbo's already unpredictable demeanor. Audiences found it endearing, authentic in a sea of perfection. Off-screen, Falk never hid his condition. He joked about it, lived fully, and even became a minor icon for disability representation in Hollywood. Behind every suspicious squint and every just one more thing was a man who knew how to turn perceived weakness into unforgettable character. In a world obsessed with appearances, Peter Falk made millions fall in love with imperfection. 2. Clark Gable. He was the king of Hollywood, rugged, masculine, impossibly charming. But Clark Gable had a secret few knew. By the time he was in his 30s, he had lost most of his teeth. Behind that megawatt smile, a full set of dentures. The cause was a mix of poor dental hygiene and a terrible gum infection. Early in his career, Gable's breath became so offensive that co-stars reportedly complained. Loretta Young was especially vocal after working with him on Call of the Wild, claiming the odor was nearly unbearable. The fix came through the dentist's chair, and quickly. His dentures transformed his career. Suddenly, Gable had that million-dollar smile, that classic Hollywood jawline, and the kind of masculine appeal that studios could sell worldwide. It wasn't just about fixing a problem. It was about creating a legend. Even more shocking, that unmistakable voice. Deep, authoritative, and magnetic, many attributed it to his false teeth. The dentures gave his speech a slightly slurred, gravelly quality, an imperfection that somehow made him seem more real, more grounded. Gable rarely spoke about his dental woes, but those who knew him never forgot the contrast between the man off-screen and the icon on-screen. His transformation wasn't just a cosmetic fix, it was Hollywood alchemy. 3. Harold Lloyd. Known for his daring stunts and wide grin, silent film legend, Harold Lloyd was the very image of physical comedy. But few realized how much of his charm was manufactured, from his smile to the fingers he no longer had. In 1919, Lloyd lost 2 fingers on his right hand in a publicity stunt gone horribly wrong. A prop bomb exploded, nearly killing him. Miraculously, he survived, and even more miraculously, he continued doing his own stunts. He wore a prosthetic glove with specially molded false fingers and developed an uncanny ability to hide the injury from the camera. But that wasn't all. Lloyd also wore false teeth, which gave him that symmetrical, boyish smile. As he aged, his perfect grin never faded, preserved thanks to careful dental work and an almost obsessive attention to appearance. His on-screen image was all-American optimism, undaunted, athletic, and always smiling. But behind the scenes, he was piecing himself back together, literally and emotionally, after a life-changing accident. The fact that audiences never noticed is a testament to Lloyd's skill and determination. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted laughs, applause, and adoration, and he got them, all while defying the odds with a glass smile and a prosthetic hand. 4. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. lit up stages with a smile so bright it could eclipse the spotlight. But in 1954, one car crash changed everything. While driving through the San Bernardino Mountains, Davis collided head-on with another vehicle. The accident shattered his face and cost him his left eye. Rushed to the hospital, Davis was terrified not for his life, but his career. Would anyone still hire a one-eyed entertainer? Surgeons couldn't save the eye, but Davis wasn't interested in self-pity. He wore a glass eye from that day forward, one that matched so well few fans ever noticed. The accident also led him to convert to Judaism, feeling the faith had saved him. On stage, he never missed a beat. Singing, dancing, acting. His energy was boundless. Behind the scenes, though, Davis was haunted by the crash. Yet he refused to let it slow him down. He cracked jokes about his eye, incorporated it into routines, and leaned into the image of a survivor. That glass eye became part of his mystique. In the Rat Pack, among giants like Sinatra and Martin, Davis held his own, not despite his injury, but partly because of the resilience it symbolized. He showed the world that even with one eye, you could still be the star of the show. 5. Edward G. Robinson. With his snarling delivery and bulldog face, Edward G. Robinson played gangsters so well that audiences thought he might be one. But beneath his tough guy persona was a man carefully reconstructed for the camera, starting with his teeth. Robinson began wearing partial dentures early in his career, due to decaying teeth and chronic gum disease. He rarely smiled widely on screen, partly because of the denture's unnatural look, and partly because of his discomfort with the dental prosthetics. Yet he learned how to shape his characters around his limitations. The slight hiss in his voice? That was the result of speaking with false teeth. The deliberate delivery? A calculated way to avoid dental slips mid-dialogue. But instead of being a hindrance, it became his signature. What made Robinson remarkable wasn't just his performance, it was how he controlled his image. He played with lighting, posture, and camera angles to ensure his dental work didn't break the illusion. He wasn't just acting, he was orchestrating every frame of his presence. In the world of make-believe, Robinson was a master craftsman. His false teeth were never exposed, but the grit, menace, and complexity they helped shape made him unforgettable. Sometimes a legend is built not on perfection, but on precise illusion. 6. Bette Davis. Bette Davis had eyes that captivated generations, but her mouth held a secret even her fiercest fans rarely knew. Behind her clipped diction and razor-sharp delivery were dental bridges and partial dentures she wore for most of her career. Years of smoking, stress, and genetics had weakened Davis's teeth, causing multiple extractions before she was even 40. But instead of letting dental problems derail her ascent, she adapted. Costume designers tailored her wardrobe to draw attention away from her mouth. Directors avoided extreme close-ups unless she specifically approved them. And yet, her voice, piercing, theatrical, unforgettable, only benefited from the prosthetics. Davis used her false teeth to control her enunciation, sharpen her tone, and add an aristocratic air to roles like Margot Channing and Baby Jane Hudson. Off-screen, Davis was self-conscious about her dental issues, but she never let that vulnerability define her. Instead, she weaponized it. Her characters weren't beautiful. They were commanding, cruel, real. In a studio system obsessed with beauty, Davis carved a new path, one that made space for ferocity, intellect, and imperfection. Her false teeth may have been hidden from view, but her boldness shone brighter than any Hollywood smile. 7. Walter Brennan. Walter Brennan was a 3-time Academy Award winner and a fixture in westerns, always playing the grizzled sidekick, the cranky old coot, or the wise farmer. But that signature sunken-cheeked look? It wasn't an act. It was because Brennan had no teeth. By his early 30s, Brennan had lost all his teeth due to a combination of a kick to the face from a mule during his stuntman days and poor dental care. He embraced dentures when necessary, but most of the time, especially on camera, he left them out entirely. The result was that unforgettable, caved-in face and nasal voice that became his trademark. Producers initially hesitated to cast him, thinking his appearance too extreme. But Brennan quickly proved that his lack of teeth only added to his authenticity. In a Hollywood filled with polished stars, he looked like he'd stepped off a real cattle drive, and directors loved it. Off-screen, Brennan wore dentures during interviews and formal events, but never hid the truth. He often joked that he owed his Oscars to his missing teeth. In many ways, he was right. Walter Brennan didn't just accept his physical differences, he built a career around them. His toothless grin became a symbol of grit, wisdom, and raw Americana. 8. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's image was one of total control, sharp brows, perfect lips, and an almost intimidating beauty. But beneath the flawless exterior lay layers of artifice, beginning with her teeth and extending to her carefully styled wigs. Crawford's dental problems began early, reportedly due to severe neglect and possible childhood malnutrition. She eventually had nearly all her natural teeth replaced with a full set of dental veneers and bridges, a process that left her mouth perpetually sore but visibly transformed. Her wigs were just as carefully curated. Though she never went completely bald, Crawford's hair began thinning in her mid-30s due to stress, constant dyeing, and harsh styling. To maintain her iconic silhouette, especially that signature helmet hair, she relied on expertly crafted wigs that added volume and control. Her dedication to perfection was so intense that she allegedly traveled with a wig stylist and a dentist on retainer. Every public appearance was choreographed to maintain the illusion. But behind the scenes, she wrestled with pain, insecurity, and the pressure to remain untouchable. Crawford's real gift wasn't beauty, it was transformation. With every false tooth and artificial curl, she constructed a myth so powerful it eclipsed reality. Hollywood didn't just make her a star, she made herself into a legend. 9. Lionel Barrymore. A towering figure in early cinema, Lionel Barrymore had the gravitas of a Shakespearean actor and the scowl of a tyrant. Known for It's a Wonderful Life, Grand Hotel, and countless MGM dramas, Barrymore often played stern patriarchs or embittered authority figures. What few realized was that he did most of this while wearing full dentures. Barrymore began losing teeth in his 40s, and by the time he reached peak stardom, he had replaced nearly all of them with false teeth. Unlike many actors who struggled with articulation, Barrymore turned it into a strength. His enunciation became crisp, almost theatrical. His voice, aged and commanding, sounded like it had been carved from granite. His dentures caused him constant discomfort, especially during long shoots. But rather than retreat from demanding roles, Barrymore leaned into them. Whether in a wheelchair after arthritis permanently immobilized him, or in dental pain, he never let the audience see anything but strength. He didn't chase youth or hide aging. He embodied it, made it noble. And in doing so, he gave generations a new model for stardom, one where grace, not glamour, was the mark of greatness. Lionel Barrymore proved that dignity doesn't depend on teeth, legs, or vanity. It lives in the performance. 10th. Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford was America's sweetheart, the eternal ingenue with cascading curls and a cherubic face. But even sweethearts have secrets. By the time she reached her 40s, the golden curls that helped define an entire era of cinema were no longer her own. Years of chemical treatments, relentless curling irons, and stress had taken their toll. Her once abundant hair thinned rapidly, forcing Pickford to rely increasingly on wigs. But she didn't wear them out of vanity. She wore them to preserve the image millions adored. Pickford's hair had become a symbol of innocence, femininity, and youth. Her contracts required her to maintain that image, even as she aged out of ingenue roles. When she finally cut her hair short in the 1920s, the press treated it as a national crisis. Fans cried betrayal. In reality, Pickford was trying to reclaim herself. The wigs helped her bridge the gap between a manufactured identity and her evolving self. Behind the perfect ringlets was a woman grappling with the cost of fame, the prison of public perception, and the physical damage done by years of being the industry's golden girl. She wore wigs not just to play a part, but to protect the mythology she helped create. And in doing so, She gave everything to Hollywood down to the last lock of hair. 11. Spencer Tracy Spencer. Tracy had one of the most commanding presences in film, gravel-voiced, emotionally raw, and effortlessly authentic. But behind that voice and those steely eyes lay a deeply personal insecurity: his teeth. Tracy struggled with dental issues for most of his adult life. Chronic infections and gum disease forced him to undergo multiple extractions, eventually leading to partial dentures. He hated them. Friends said he loathed speaking about his teeth, and he avoided wide smiles in photos unless absolutely necessary. The discomfort affected him physically and emotionally. During long shoots, he'd reportedly retreat to his trailer to readjust his dentures and calm himself. But never once did he let it show on screen. His performances remained magnetic, vulnerable, and human. In a town obsessed with image, Tracy found power in restraint. He didn't rely on a dazzling smile or exaggerated charm. His appeal was quieter, deeper, the kind that didn't need perfection to feel profound. Spencer Tracy's false teeth were invisible to his audience, but they were a daily reminder to him of fragility. And still, he gave every role his all, biting down on pain, pressing through it, and emerging as one of the greatest actors of his time. 12th. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was all allure: angular cheekbones, half-lidded eyes, and lips that curled into mystery. She mesmerized audiences with elegance and power. But beneath the glamour was a careful construction: wigs, dental work, and prosthetics, meticulously arranged to manufacture perfection. Dietrich was obsessed with control over her appearance. As early as the 1930s, she began wearing partial dentures to replace molars and preserve her facial structure. Her false teeth helped maintain her bone structure, which she feared would collapse and alter her iconic face. By the 1940s, she was also wearing custom wigs to offset thinning hair and maintain her dramatic silhouettes. Her hairpieces weren't just cosmetic, they were sculptural. She directed how they were lit, styled, and shot. She even carried her own lighting technician to every set to ensure she remained bathed in flattering shadows. Dietrich's manipulation of her image wasn't vanity, it was strategy. She knew the power of illusion, the currency of beauty in a cruel system, and she turned herself into an untouchable goddess. To the public, she was eternal. But to those close to her, she was a woman constantly rebuilding herself. One porcelain crown, one false lock of hair, one carefully placed camera angle at a time. Her perfection was never natural, but it was masterful. 13. Humphrey Bogart. The Smile. Built in a dentist's chair. Humphrey Bogart's crooked smile, half sneer and half charm, became one of the most recognizable features in classic Hollywood. But that expression wasn't entirely natural. Bogart wore partial dentures for most of his adult life, a result of poor dental care and complications from a Navy injury. Legend has it that during his time in the military, a prisoner struck him in the mouth, causing long-term damage to his teeth and lip. His scar and speech pattern gave him a slight lisp, which studios initially feared would limit his potential. But instead, it became part of his mystique. Bogart's dentures weren't glamorous, and they certainly weren't comfortable. He hated them. Co-stars occasionally noticed him adjusting them between takes, yet his discomfort never once compromised his intensity. Whether in Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, or The Big Sleep, he used every imperfection to make his characters more grounded, more human. Off-screen, Bogart was famously self-deprecating, once saying, "The only thing you owe the public is a good performance," and that's exactly what he gave, every time, teeth or not. 14. Barbara Stanwyck. A Hollywood face held together by precision. Barbara Stanwyck was steel wrapped in satin, tough, luminous, unforgettable. Yet even she wasn't immune to the pressures of on-screen perfection. By the mid-1940s, Stanwyck began relying on dental prosthetics and wigs to maintain her image. A combination of genetic dental issues and repeated dental surgeries left her with bridges and partial dentures. She reportedly suffered chronic jaw discomfort, but kept working tirelessly, never letting on how much pain she endured. Her voice, smoky and razor-sharp, was partially shaped by adjusting to her dentures over time. Stanwyck's hair, once famously lush, began thinning in her 40s due to age, studio treatments, and stress. Rather than risk being exposed in an unflattering close-up, she had custom wigs made, so natural-looking that even her closest co-stars sometimes couldn't tell. But her strength wasn't in hiding the flaws, it was in transcending them. Whether playing femme fatales or no-nonsense mothers, Stanwyck never flinched. She turned physical discomfort into emotional truth, her performance sharpened by real pain. In an industry where aging could be a death sentence, Stanwyck quietly defied time, armed with grit, false teeth, and hairpieces crafted like armor. 15. Raymond Burr. The stoic icon with hidden enhancements. To audiences, Raymond Burr was the embodiment of courtroom authority as Perry Mason and the embodiment of stoicism as Ironside. But beneath that calm, commanding exterior was a man who relied on more than acting chops. He depended on dentures and wigs to stay camera-ready. Burr began losing his teeth in his late 30s due to a combination of smoking and severe periodontal disease. He quietly adopted full dentures but avoided discussing them publicly. Unlike some stars who fought against aging, Burr embraced a mature presence, projecting wisdom and gravitas that only deepened as he aged. His hair, however, was another story. As it began thinning in the early 60s, Burr turned to wigs to maintain continuity for long-running roles. The Perry Mason audience, accustomed to the same slick hairstyle, never knew the difference. Burr's stylist created custom pieces that blended seamlessly, even under studio lights. Burr's secret enhancements were not vanity. They were tools to meet expectations. The public expected consistency, and Burr gave it to them flawlessly, episode after episode. He may have worn wigs and dentures, but what truly held Raymond Burr together was integrity and an unwavering sense of purpose. 16. Tallulah Bankhead. The rebel with false teeth and untamed fire. Tallulah Bankhead was fire and thunder, her voice a smoke-soaked drawl, her presence unforgettable, but few knew that beneath the bravado was a woman with failing teeth and a deep-rooted disdain for convention. Years of chain-smoking, alcohol, and hard living destroyed her teeth by her early 40s. She famously quipped that her false teeth were the only stable thing in her life. Bankhead wore dentures, but not always faithfully. Friends recalled wild parties where she'd remove them mid-toast, laughing hysterically. On stage and screen, she often portrayed haughty aristocrats or unflinching rebels, roles she mirrored in real life. Her dentures sometimes gave her speech an exaggerated flair, adding to her already dramatic delivery. Bankhead didn't hide her flaws, she flaunted them. Her wigs, her teeth, her unapologetic manner, all part of the performance. She refused to be polished, and in doing so became uniquely magnetic. In a world of illusion, Tallulah Bankhead made imperfection iconic. 17. George Burns. The comedian with a crafted smile. George Burns had a wit sharper than his cigars and a grin that could disarm even the sternest critic. But that grin was built, not born. By the time Burns reached his 40s, his teeth were gone, the result of poor dental hygiene and years of smoking cigars that rarely left his hand. He wore full dentures for decades, often joking that they were his best investment. Burns was so used to them that he could remove and reinsert them mid-joke, using them as props in his act. Audiences roared when he turned aging into comedy. Burns's dentures gave him that classic elder statesman look, smiling with just a hint of mischief. His voice, slightly nasal and gravelly, was shaped by them too. But instead of apologizing for the changes, he leaned in, aging publicly and hilariously. His humor, his resilience, and his ability to embrace prosthetics as part of the performance made him a beloved figure across generations. George Burns didn't just wear dentures, he wore them like a crown. 18. Jean Harlow, the Platinum Beauty. Built by Wigs and Smiles. Jean Harlow was the original blonde bombshell, the woman who lit up screens with a shock of platinum hair and a smile that made men swoon. But her look was as manufactured as it was mesmerizing. To maintain that famous platinum hue, Harlow underwent extreme bleaching treatments that included ammonia and peroxide. Over time, the process destroyed her natural hair, leaving it brittle and sparse. By her mid-20s, she had begun wearing wigs and hairpieces in nearly every role. Her teeth, too, were a product of early dental intervention. To enhance her smile, MGM dentists fitted her with veneers and partial bridges, a relatively new technology at the time. The result was dazzling, but required constant upkeep and adjustment. Harlow's beauty was painstakingly crafted, each curl, each flash of teeth carefully designed. She embraced the fantasy, knowing that Hollywood demanded perfection and punished reality. She died tragically young, but left behind an image so polished it shimmered. Jean Harlow wasn't just a star. She was an invention, one built from peroxide, porcelain, and the dreams of an entire generation. These old Hollywood stars lived behind illusions of beauty, strength, and perfection. But behind the wigs, glass eyes, and false teeth were artists who refused to let imperfections stop them. They didn't just survive the industry's demands, they mastered them. And in doing so, they became legends beyond the mask.